with precious metals right now, there's this big disconnect between the physical price and the paper price. And sometimes if people just buy a small amount of precious metals, that they can get it at near the paper price. You know, if they buy a little bit of physical metal, they can get it at the paper price. But those buying, millions of dollars worth of precious metals are paying, you're saying, like 100% premium, so double the price. He's a little confused because he's wondering what evidence you have for that.
Actual sales, actual translations from two sources, one of whom is the Voice.
And if you can give us an update on where that stands.
Yeah, the premiums are rising every month. I'll give you an example. 6 months ago, he said the prices were like $1,600, $1,700, a $500 premium. Now he's saying it's an 80 to 100% price premium. And as the paper price goes down, the physical price goes up. The divergence is getting bigger, Eli. Bigger. One transaction I was asked not to reveal the details for, and I keep names and locations out of the conversation, but a big transaction of something on the order of $50, $60 million was at a $2,100 price per gold per ounce. And a much bigger transaction, well over $100 million, was at $2,500 an ounce. And the Voice says that he knows of actual transactions that are closer to $3,000. When you're talking with people, ordinary guys like us, we don't mix elbows with those types. So if someone says to me, Jim, I don't ever hear anything about that with anyone I know, and I say, of course you don't. Why would you expect to? How many people do you know who are a billionaire? Well, none. Okay, well, that answers the question. We don't hear about them. That's why the Voice is on my team. He runs in those circles, and I make that information available. He's a conduit to the hat trick letter. People need to know that $2,100 and $2,500 are being paid for very large transactions. Cash. They don't pay them with treasury bills. You don't pay for real stuff using soiled toilet paper. It's not accepted. It's cash. It's immediately, offsetting previous debts and obligations and whatever, and poof, they've got their $500 million worth of gold. The Voice told me 3 years ago, Jim, I got a number of clients who want to buy $100 million, $500 million worth of gold. And I tell them the same thing every time. Buy $20 to $30 million worth every few weeks. Because if you want it in one big swoop, you're going to have to pay double. It's the same point. Okay, let's move on.
This viewer is wanting to know, still on the topic of precious metals, when considering purchasing allocated gold and silver in a professional bullion market vault, in your opinion, is the LBMA a secure location?
Well, yeah, but how much gold can you get? I mean, that's like saying how much gold can I buy in the COMEX, and is it good quality? Well, the paper contracts are very good quality. It's got fine cotton parchment, and the ink is excellent. How much gold do you think you can buy at the LBMA? I mean, you're talking about the quality and integrity of the gold product at a place that doesn't pass much physical gold. So what's the question? Is that Mercedes a good quality at the concession down the road that doesn't have any? Yeah, the London market has good quality gold, but it's not for you. It's for their Chinese customers. London is a conduit for China. And the source of the metal is both the Vatican and the Basel, Switzerland locations. The Vatican's never mentioned in any of these conversations. You've got 1,500 years of gold collection at the end of the Roman Empire all the way to the Renaissance. So, yeah, there's some good quality gold in London, but there were stories 3 years ago that I remember where they're talking about the bars coming out of London being delivered that had 1920, 1930, 1940 markings on them. And the story had a byline of London's reaching the bottom of the barrel, digging up their high quality, what they call London good delivery bars. Okay, well, London's got some very high quality bars, but if there are only 5 or 6 of them, why do you care? I don't. I never worry about the quality of London gold bars. They don't have very much. And all they do have is really coming from Basel. It gets shipped quickly to London and then to the many Swiss refiners where all the markings change, which means that all the stolen gold has the evidence removed. And then it's shipped to China, where they've got maybe an extra 9 in their required refinement percentage, and they like it in kilogram bars rather than ounce bars. So I don't care about London quality gold. They're basically a port facility, and I think they've run out of gold long ago.
All right, moving on here. This question is from Robert, and he's wanting to know, I'm having a hard time understanding, in a world, quote-unquote, above the law, non-accountability, and no auditing, why central banks just can't keep funding failing entities into infinity. What is the mechanism that will stop them?
Well, they're above the law, and they give orders to governments, and they arrange for press networks to favor candidates, and they make phone calls that start wars. They make phone calls that start movements. So maybe the better question is, do we, the people, have any power at all? Central banks have their toxic balance sheets. They're the buyers of last resort. Anyone who thinks the Fed is going to reduce their balance sheet and move toward normalcy is an absolute valid moron. So why do they have permission to continue? Because they run the world as we know it. And that's, I think, in the process of changing. Here's a funny little fact. The Fed's balance sheet, what is it, $4.5 trillion worth of toxic crap? The controlling interest of the Federal Reserve is often rumored to be in Chinese hands now. So could it be that the Fed allowed itself to be the buyer of last resort, filled its balance sheet with toxic elements, and dispatched it to the Chinese so they could control the toxic vat in the next chapter? It's their problem. It's their baby. Their project. That's kind of how I look at it. The details are lacking. But, I mean, if you're wondering why the elite are able to get away with their murders and their thefts, this is a question that maybe should have been asked 200 years ago. Maybe it was asked 200 years ago, but we don't have answers then. We don't have answers now. I mean, I like to point to one particular story called the free-scale chip. One of those Ukrainian airliners that was loaded with Dutch. It also had engineers from the Free-Scale Chip Company. And Freescale at the time, and probably still is the case, was the world's leading anti-hacking chip, a multi-embedded processor that prevented hacking of computer systems and telecom systems, communication systems. And the story just did not come out in the mainstream news because the Rothschilds control a lot of the mainstream news. So the murderer put out the stories through his dutiful press, not to mention the free-scale chip element as motive for murder of an airliner. Has there been any prosecution for the murder of 200 people on the Ukrainian airline? No. Same question. Same question. Why is it permitted? Because the murderers control the press, the murderers control government, the murderers control armies. Next question.
To wrap up here, I was just wondering if you could give us an update on your outlook for the economy in the United States and some of its allies.
Okay. We've had kind of a frozen situation in the last month and a half or two. I've been not exactly in a quandary, but I've been in a challenged position and had this conversation with a couple of my colleagues, two or three of my favorite colleagues. There are 9 of us, but there are 2 or 3 that I have more conversations with others than with others. And it's been about the frozen nature of things. The United States has been frozen on economic policy, frozen on financial policy, frozen on a number of different policies since the election. And people are waiting to see, well, what's going to happen with the Trump administration? What new policies are going to come in? What new projects are going to be launched? What new financial issues are going to be solved quickly in order to proceed? And I've had a challenge, and in a nutshell, it's what do I put in the hat trick letter for January? Since my focus has always been for 12 and a half years, finance and economics, when there's really not a lot happening in finance and economics, and there's a great deal happening in politics and war. The hat trick letter is not a newsletter of politics and war. So I made a compromise that this month there's going to be a lot on the politics and policy transition. And that'll be one report. And the other report's going to be about banking, gold, currencies, and economic issues. So it's a 50-50 split. I don't deal much with politics. I deal with transition in policy. Policy is not politics. It can be, but not always. Right now, the U.S. has to solve some gigantic problems, namely inadequate industry and a dollar that needs to be replaced. We cannot continue to print hundreds of billions of dollars at the Fed to cover our toxic bonds and have it continue as the global reserve foundation of banking systems around the world. We can't do that. So I think Trump is going to have a major challenge to do something while avoiding another. He's going to have to start lots and lots of projects regarding infrastructure and encourage businesses to be formed atop that new infrastructure, while at the same time planning the transition move away from the dollar as global currency reserve. Very few people realize it because it's never in the stupid-ass press that he has about 6 people, including Judy Schulten, who are gold standard advocates. And this is where some danger lies. What did McKinley and Garfield have in common with Kennedy? Gold advocates. They get assassinated. It's the most common element in the U.S. assassinated president line. Lincoln was a little bit different. He opposed the London bankers. He did not want to have the London bankers finance the Civil War, so he created a different financial instrument that really pissed off the London bankers, who I believe had him murdered. And of course, it's always easy. The Lee Harvey Oswald back then had a name of John Wilkes Booth. I mean, the Sirhan who killed Robert Kennedy, he had the name of John Wilkes Booth. And the press, in a dutiful manner, just castigated the name and probably seized the entire family's assets just to make it look good. Okay, so Trump has to he has to create and ignite an economic foundation revolution in a positive way. He must rely on the toxic dollar to finance it while he arranges for the transition away from the dollar. This is the major challenge for Trump, in addition to watching his back. And he's got a lot of smart people and powerful people to watch his back. I'm curious to see how much Secret Service he hires, because I think the cabal is going to work through the old line Department of Treasury to hire killers in the Secret Service. It's the most controversial thing I've said today. I'm going to leave it right there. But moving on to other economies. Do you really think the European economy is going to move forward when Germany continues its influx of Arab human garbage with the legal right to rape, kill, and murder? Now, if you think that's an outlandish statement, the legal right to rape, kill, murder, and steal and assault, you're dead wrong. Take a look at dozens and dozens of suspended sentences of people who have lost their jobs, lost their property, who've been charged with, I don't even know what the charge is, but they've been legally prosecuted for trying to get attention to all the crimes committed by the Arabs who come in without proper visas. Okay, this is all Soros project, who's the boy for the European fascists. Australia has a different distinction. Sorry, my voice is going. Australia is being overrun by Chinese money, pushing up their property prices. I've got numerous clients commenting about Brisbane, Sydney, Canberra, even Auckland in New Zealand, prices zooming up. The Chinese have been actively buying mine properties and port facilities all across Australia and New Zealand. So the Australians and New Zealanders cannot actually stop the flow very easily of money and people from China. Their economy is going to be challenged because they've got some very severe problems since the year 2000 of joining completely with the U.S. neocon movement with tremendous amounts of military spending to wreck their finances. You can talk about all you want about Australian economic challenges from, say, reduced trade or lower mine product prices, prices of metals. I'm not just talking about gold and silver. I'm talking about iron, aluminum, cobalt, you name it, tin. You can talk all you want about that. But the big problem in Australia is their government deficit from tremendous increases to please the Bush II administration. And they're having a very tough challenge getting rid of all their asshole leaders who kissed Bush's ass. Trump's got his work cut out. The U.S. economy is in tatters. I just saw something recently about Obama claiming that in many categories, the U.S. is better off than it was 8 years ago. Every single one has a false statistic on it. Obama more than doubled the national debt. I think it went from something like 9 trillion to 19. Okay, more debt to the U.S. government than all previous presidents combined, and we're better off? I don't think so. Obamacare was the biggest sledgehammer slash to small business in the history of the United States economy. It's really messed up small business. So there's a lot of real junk in the road for the U.S., European, Australian economies. And it's not going to be easy. Anyone who thinks that Trump's going to have some things solved in 6 months, you're nuts. You're nuts. Trump is going to have a hard time starting in the right direction. Just 3 initiatives I'm curious where he's going to start. He actually might start with the press networks, but I think he should start with the infrastructure projects, and maybe hold out one big bank as being fraudulent and prosecute them, and maybe shut it down, like J.P. Morgan, shut them down. We'll see where he goes, but we're living in very interesting times. I think you can expect, at the very least, an end to the Russian conflict with the United States, an end, or at least a planned phase out of the sanctions, which are stupid, just truly stupid, and look for constructive trade talks with China. I think some of the stories that you've heard about the Trump camp wanting to go to war with China over the islands, I think those are false stories from the false news like CNN, which needs to be shut down. They need to have their license yanked. CNN hired over a dozen people from the Hillary campaign office, not hire. Hillary took a dozen people from the, I'm sorry, let me get this right. CNN took a dozen people from the Hillary campaign and more people from the Clinton Foundation and gave them phony press badges with CNN name on it in order to pose as reporters. This is a deep, deep violation of press standards. CNN needs to be shut down, have their license revoked or suspended, and see if they can deal with, say, a 60-day suspension with no broadcasting, and see how their advertising revenue is affected. That's how I think Trump should go after CNN. CNN is the biggest propaganda, lying, garbage network in the world. They make the old Soviet Pravda look solid. Big challenges coming, Elijah. It's going to be very interesting. I'm on the watch for a lot of different things, and I got a list, and it's interesting. These are revitalizing times. We're offering a little bit of hope, but I'd like to see some progress right away to stop the chemtrails, right away to stop the vaccinations and their laced viruses and cancer-causing agents and autism agents. I'd like to see progress there. I'd like to see progress with the gold trade note. I'd like to see progress with free trade zones and infrastructure projects in the United States. I'd like to see progress in arresting Soros and shutting down all of his NGOs. I'd like to see progress in shutting down the entire Clinton Foundation. I'd like to see progress in exiling some of the traitors who served as past U.S. presidents. That's my wish list. So, it's great being on with you, Elijah. We had a little pause. I think it's been a couple months since our last one, but this one was meaty, and I appreciate having me on.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. Before we let you go, did you want to share with the viewers where they can find you online? It's
www.goldenjackass.com. This month is number 154. I just look at that and go, wow. It's been a year and a half or more, and the website contains a number of free links for past interviews and past public articles, and it's promotional. There is a mission involved to inform the public about a lot of things. I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I mean in terms of understanding what's really going on, what some of the true economic and financial issues are, and challenges and crime scenes and what they're all about. But there's also the desire to promote the Hat Trick Letter, my newsletter. I'm the editor of the Hat Trick Letter. It's been around since May of 2004. And I do get tired once in a while, but I just sit back and take some afternoon naps and go for long bike rides and have a good dinner, have a good meal, watch a sporting event. I got ways to recharge my jets, re-energize. But the Hat Trick Letter includes 2 monthly publications. One is the Global Money War Report. It has to do about the defense of the dollar, the continuation of the king dollar, and the challenges for it to continue, which I don't think will happen for much longer. I don't think it will continue in its present form much longer. The second report is the Golden Currency Report, a lot more ground level, supply and demand and price of gold and issues regarding price and issues regarding other currencies and how they'll be migrating into gold and movements by companies to pay in gold trade notes, movement by countries to create a more valid currency, debt issues, oil, the Eurasian trade zone. That is included in the Golden Currency Report. The Global Money War Report used to be called the Macroeconomic Report. But when Lehman happened and a lot of correct forecasts came to the table, I decided to change the nature of that report. I mean, why forecast the decline and fall of the housing market and the bust of the mortgage finance market when it just happened? So I changed it to be the dollar, its defense, the wars to keep it going, the central bank policy like QE. I correctly anticipated QE several months in advance. I correctly anticipated the 0% several months in advance. I correctly stated that neither one would be temporary, each one would be permanent. If you recall back in 2009 when the 0% started and 2011 when the QE was started, each was reported by the Fed to be temporary, with justification why it had to be temporary. I came out in my report saying each one will be permanent, and here's why, and they have been permanent because now we're in the 7th and 8th years. QE is in its, I think, 6th year now. The 0% is in its 8th year. We were told that it would be a year or so, maybe less. Temporary policy. No, you don't have temporary policies to keep the dollar going. You have permanent because everything gets degraded. So anyway, these are topics covered, Elijah, in the hat trick letter. This month, I think I have a very interesting report. It's different, and I have to adapt with what's happening and the events of the day. I keep at a very low level, a minimum, the politics and war. I don't go on, page after page about what's going on in Syria and Ukraine. I might make one paragraph comment on progress toward their resolution. And I make comments frequently why the Ukraine war was brought about, motives to sustain the dollar and to cut off Russia, etc. There are lots of very strange stories out there. I cover them. I mean, one that I'd like to leave you with is the Cyprus element, the Cyprus story, 2013. We were told that they had bank failures and they were going to do confiscations and bail-ins, and they started the bail-in model. But very few people realize Cyprus was what Russia used to dump treasury bonds and buy gold. Cyprus is what the Russian central bank used to settle all their European bank transactions. So the United States and London attacked Cyprus to shut it down. That's not in the news. The Russian dumping of treasuries for gold done in Cyprus was not in the news. We're not blessed with news by Western news organizations. We're dumped with lies, propaganda, and public opinion shaping, which I resent very deeply. So the hat trick letter is to remedy that, provide actual information. And a lot of what I learned regarding Cyprus came through The Voice and one other fellow who became a member of my little jackass colleague group. All right, so pleasure being on. I hope people go to the www.goldenjackass.com website, bounce around, sign up for the newsletter, learn. There's always something to be learned, even for people who've been around a lot. And one of the wonderful things about the newsletter is that I've got a few dozen extremely well-connected and smart clients who send me information, and they end up in the hat trick letter. So it's like a switchboard for really juicy information and analysis. And I'm very grateful to many clients for their contributions. All right. Well, thank you for having me on, Elijah, and good luck to you.
Same to you, and thank you so much for your time.
All right. Bye now.